The wind that morning carried a chill that seemed to cut deeper than usual. Autumn had painted the college campus gold and amber, leaves scattering underfoot like fading memories. Emily Harper tugged at the sleeves of an oversized denim jacket, the one her brother Jake used to wear every day before he left for the army. The cuffs were frayed, the collar soft with years of wear, and though it was too big for her, it felt like armor. Beneath its weight, she felt a little closer to him, safe, grounded, loved. But as she crossed the courtyard, surrounded by laughing groups and warm conversations, she felt like an echo of someone who no longer belonged anywhere. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in stories that remind us how love can find us even in our quietest pain, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling stories that touch hearts like yours. Emily had never planned to be here. Not alone, not carrying the ache of a goodbye that still hadn't settled. Her brother Jake had been her anchor, her best friend, her voice of courage when life got too loud. They grew up in a small town in Ohio, where life was simple and the stars seemed close enough to touch. But when Jake enlisted, everything changed. At first, his letters were full of jokes and plans for the future. Then came the silence. And then, the knock on the door. It had been a year since that day. A year since her world tilted and never quite found balance again. She still remembered her mother collapsing to the floor, her father's trembling hands, the crisp envelope with the government seal, and the words, "We regret to inform you." Emily had run to her room, clutching Jake's jacket, sobbing until there was nothing left. From that night on, she wore it everywhere, its faint smell of cologne and smoke the only thing keeping her from falling apart completely. Now, in her first semester of college, she was trying to blend in. But grief had a way of isolating you. Her classmates talked about movies, weekend parties, or upcoming exams. But Emily carried a different kind of weight, one that made small talk feel impossible. So she kept her head down, moved quietly between classes, and avoided the world as best she could. That's when she met Ethan. It was a Friday afternoon in October, just after her literature class. She had been sitting under a tree, sketching absent-mindedly in her notebook, a habit Jake always teased her for. She drew faces, random shapes, and bits of memories she couldn't say out loud. When she looked up, a soccer ball rolled to her feet. A tall guy in a gray hoodie jogged over, slightly out of breath, flashing an apologetic smile. "Sorry about that," he said, brushing his hair back as he picked up the ball. "Didn't mean to interrupt your masterpiece." Emily shook her head, mumbling something about it being fine, but when he noticed the jacket, Jake's old, faded denim, he grinned. "That's a cool jacket," he said. "Vintage?" She hesitated. "It was my brother's." Something in her tone made him pause. Most people would have just nodded and moved on, but Ethan didn't. He crouched slightly, his voice gentle. He's lucky to have a sister who still wears it. That small kindness, a stranger seeing her, not just the jacket, unlocked something inside her. They talked for a while that afternoon, about classes, about how he'd transferred from another college, about how he missed home too. Before leaving, Ethan smiled again and said, "See you around, denim girl." And he did. Over the next few weeks, Ethan seemed to appear wherever Emily went. Sometimes at the library, sometimes at the coffee shop, sometimes walking beside her after class. He had this effortless warmth, the kind that made people feel like they belonged. Slowly, the walls Emily had built began to crack. She started laughing again, something she hadn't done in months. She even told him about Jake, about how they'd stayed up all night stargazing, about his ridiculous jokes, and how she never got to say goodbye. Ethan didn't try to fix her pain. He just listened. Sometimes, that's all anyone really needs. One chilly afternoon, they walked through the park, the trees glowing orange in the fading sunlight. Emily was shivering slightly, her hands tucked into Jake's jacket pockets. Ethan noticed. He reached out and tugged the collar gently, smiling. "You know," he said softly, "it's perfect, just like you." Emily froze. No one had ever said something like that to her, not since Jake. Her eyes burned with tears she didn't expect, and she turned away quickly, afraid he'd see. But Ethan didn't laugh or back off. He just stood there, waiting, his expression quiet and sincere. Those words weren't romantic in the usual sense. They were healing. Because for the first time, someone saw her not as broken, not as the girl who lost her brother, but as someone whole. From that day, something changed between them. Emily began to look forward to mornings, to little moments, a cup of coffee shared before class, the way he'd text her random facts just to make her smile. And in those small moments, she started to believe life could be beautiful again, even after loss. But healing isn't a straight path. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes cruel. One night, after a long day of studying, Emily got a call from home. Her mom was crying. Their dad had fallen ill. Something about stress and his heart not being strong enough. Emily's world began spinning again. She dropped everything and drove home that weekend, Jake's jacket still clinging to her shoulders like a lifeline. In the hospital, surrounded by beeping machines and sterile walls, she felt 12 years old again. Helpless, scared, desperate for her brother to walk through the door and tell her everything would be okay. She sat beside her father's bed, holding his hand, whispering prayers she wasn't sure she still believed in. When she finally returned to campus days later, exhausted and hollow, Ethan was waiting for her. She didn't say anything at first, just walked into his arms and cried. He didn't ask for explanations, didn't tell her to be strong. He just held her quietly, as if he understood that sometimes silence says more than words ever could. That night, they sat on a bench under the same tree where they first met. The air was cold, their breath visible in the moonlight. Emily told him how scared she was, of losing more people, of feeling too much, of never being okay again. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You don't have to be okay all the time." Sometimes just showing up is enough, that became her mantra. Weeks passed, and little by little, Emily began to reclaim her life. She started volunteering at a local veterans center, sharing art therapy sessions with others who'd lost someone. She told Jake's story there, how he'd once said, "Be brave for me, kiddo." Every time she spoke his name, it hurt a little less, like the wound was finally learning to close. Ethan supported her quietly through it all. He'd show up with coffee, help her paint murals for the center, or just sit beside her while she worked. One day, as they painted a memorial wall together, he dipped his brush, turned to her, and said, "You know, I think your brother would be really proud of you." Emily smiled through tears. "I hope so." "He would," Ethan said firmly, "because you didn't let the darkness win." It was that moment she realized something profound. Jake wasn't gone, not completely. He lived in every act of kindness she gave, in every smile she shared, in every heartbeat that still carried love instead of fear. Months later, on the anniversary of Jake's passing, Emily visited his grave. The winter air was biting, but she wore the same denim jacket, its fabric soft from time. She placed a small drawing on the headstone, a sketch of the two of them sitting under the stars. Beneath it, she'd written, "I'm okay now." When she turned around, Ethan was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, waiting. He didn't speak, didn't need to. She walked to him, leaned into his shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, she felt peace. Because love, real love, isn't about replacing someone you've lost. It's about finding the courage to live again, to open your heart even when it's been broken, and to see beauty in the pieces that remain. Jake's jacket would always be her reminder of that, a symbol of everything she'd lost and everything she'd found. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories that heal and inspire. And before you go, comment below with one word that describes what hope means to you. As the sun dipped behind the horizon that evening, Emily and Ethan walked hand in hand across the campus where it all began. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying laughter, memories, and the faintest echo of Jake's voice saying, "Be brave, kiddo." She smiled softly, clutching the jacket a little tighter, and whispered back, "I am."